I'm really excited to have you all on this New Day journey with us this morning. We have Washington native Amanda Knox, and she's been free for the last 14 years, at least free in the sense that she's no longer sitting in a prison for a murder she did not commit. Back in 2007, she spent 4 years in an Italian prison, wrongfully convicted in the murder of her then roommate, before finally being acquitted. And that wasn't the end of the legal troubles with the Italian court. At least she was back home, but free? Not entirely, at least not mentally. And almost 2 decades later, Amanda Knox feels like she is finally reclaiming her identity and finding true freedom. And she shares that process in her new book, Free: My Search for Meaning. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So I want to get right into it. This is your second book, like we said. Why do you call this one your story versus the first book? What makes them different?
Yeah, so Waiting to Be Heard was published back in 2013 when I was still in the midst of my trials. I think my acquittal had recently been overturned. I was facing a new trial, and I really felt like Waiting to Be Heard was me reacting to all of these stories that had been written about me. I had been in prison, unable to tell my side of the story for so long, and so Waiting to Be Heard was my attempt to put my story out there and to really there was a lot of misinformation out there, so trying to reestablish what was true and what was not true. This story, however, is very much what I feel is my story. In a lot of wrongful conviction stories, you tend to see that there's the crime, and there's the trial, and then they get out of prison, and then they have their first hamburger, and the end, curtain closes, nothing ever happens to them ever again. And I like to say that actually I feel like that's when a person's story truly begins, because suddenly they are now in the world. They have to re-enter the world, rebuild themselves, reestablish a sense of where they belong in the world, and also process how this traumatic experience has become a part of who they are. I think that is true of wrongfully convicted people, but also anyone who has been through a really traumatic ordeal. Is like when you are no longer in survival mode, what do you do? And my own journey is full of misadventures and mistakes. And I think it's really important not just to highlight oh, yay, I'm doing great now, but all the ways that the trauma of the initial, someone breaking into my home and raping and murdering my roommate, how that has had ripple effects throughout my life.
Wow, so important, and you can really tell the difference. So thank you for sharing the difference between the two books. And in this book too, it mentions you learned about the currency of kindness. You say, when I couldn't get what I needed, I could still give what someone else needed. What currency of kindness did you realize that you could offer in prison and beyond? Right,
so really understanding, I have a fun little moment of thinking, be careful what you wish for in life, because I went to Italy to become a translator. I really wanted to understand language and culture and be able to be that bridge builder between people who couldn't otherwise understand each other. And I get thrown into prison, my life is completely ruined, and then I find myself in a position to be a translator for prisoners. So after I'd spent about a year or so in prison, I became fluent in both prison Italian and courtroom Italian. And a lot of the women that I was in prison with were not Italian. They were also foreigners, so they couldn't speak the language. And so I ended up writing a lot of their correspondence for them, translating their court documents for them, going with them to the doctors to explain what ailments they had, and really just learning that out of all the people that I was in prison with, yes, I was innocent, but also I was really lucky in comparison, and trying to figure out how could I be a resource instead of being a competitor for the scarce resources that were available.
Wow, so powerful. And in your story too, there's definitely a common theme of feeling stuck. Obviously when you were in prison, but even when you came home, because you felt like you were never really free, just with the scrutiny, media, everything that was going on. So what have you learned from all that can help with other people that are maybe sitting at home and feeling stuck?
Yeah, I think one of the really surprising ironies that I experienced was, I had spent all this time in prison just wanting to go home, wanting to have my life back. And then weirdly, when I came home, I was put into a world that that didn't have a place for me anymore. I couldn't go back to the life that I had before. I was being stalked. I was receiving death threats. I couldn't go out my front door without somebody taking pictures of me. And I realized very quickly that I was just the girl accused of murder. And whether or not I proved my innocence would never change that. For the rest of my life, I would be proving my innocence every single day. And that meant that I either had to be perfect or invisible. And it was just completely terrifying. So how do you find purpose in that? It was honestly a little bit easier to find purpose in prison than it was in freedom.
Yeah, fair.
And so going on this journey again of stumbling through trying to find my place in the world is really what this book is about.
Do you still feel like that girl, the girl that was accused of murder, or do you feel different now? And is this part of like that journey to heal, writing a book like this?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I've realized is that there's the life that we should have lived, and then there's the life that we really are living. And I think part of the grieving process is like doing homage to that life you should have lived. Like, I never should have been, accused of murder and put through prison and all of that. I never should have been the girl accused of murder. But that's not my reality. My reality is this. And so what do I do to make this life worth living? I had to ask myself that question in prison, and then I had to ask myself that question again, all over again in freedom. And it took really coming into contact with other communities of people who had been through traumatic experiences, either women who had been vilified in the media or other people who had been wrongly convicted, or even just, young people reaching out to me on social media saying that they were feeling vilified in their community. What do I do? And I think one of the things that I really think and believe is that the second we just allow ourselves to grieve that life we should have lived and let it go, that then we can become grounded in the life we do live. Except I am the girl accused of murder. There's nothing I can do about that, but I am not limited by that definition. That is not a box that I have to be contained in. It is a box that I can step on and use as a platform to share my own message and tell my own story.
That's really powerful for a lot of people at home and me. Thank you for sharing that. And I saw a recent interview where you talked about how you're going to explain, to your children the injustice that you went through. So if you can walk us through what that discussion looks like and beyond.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I wanted to show in this book is that the way that you experience trauma and grief is something, it's almost like this awkward box that you're carrying around for the rest of your life. It's not that it just goes away. Every time something new and like a new phase of your life begins, you are going to be reflecting upon what has happened to you in this new light. And really, like, giving birth to my daughter really hit me very hard about what I had gone through, but also what my mom had gone through. Like, I gave birth to my daughter and she was crying because she had just been born,
right,
and was just like, I'm here, oh my God. And my first words to her were, I'm sorry, because I couldn't take away her pain from her. And I was just stricken by this realization that the entire time, my mom had wanted to take that pain away from me and she couldn't.
Right.
And like how just devastating that was for her. And so I think for me, what I'm trying to show when I talk to my kids about this is like there are inevitable pains that are going to happen to us in life, but we do not have to feel like they take over our lives. They are not. Our life is not over the second we experience overwhelming pain. We can hold it. We will hold each other through it, and we will get to the other side and be bigger and better for it.
Wow. Okay, well, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable. And sorry that I'm getting all emotional. And Amanda will be reading from her book, Free, on April 21st at the Elliott Bay Book Company, along with musician Chris Ballou. So make sure to RSVP. And I know there's much more to talk about, so don't worry. Amanda will be back later in the show to share more about what she calls her life's mission now, advocating for and supporting others who have been wrongfully accused. We're continuing our conversation, focusing on the work Amanda is doing with the Innocence Center that works to free the innocent and prevent wrongful convictions. Amanda, thank you for staying with us and sharing more about this. So I know you're deeply passionate about this. You sit on the board of the Innocence Center. So tell me about the work that they're doing.
Excellent. So the Innocence Center is one of many of these innocence projects that are throughout the United States and throughout the world. It's not just specific to a certain region. It's looking at cases that are all over the world. And it's really, its primary goal is to identify cases of innocent people who are in prison and to work to help bring those people out. And I think one of the big things that's really challenging about this work is very often you have lots of innocence cases, but do you have the means to prove their innocence? Or do you have they exhausted all of their appeals? Like a lot of the times we have to say no, even to people that we know are innocent, because the legal system doesn't allow us to reopen their case after a certain point, and it can be really devastating.
Wow. And you actually just got an award too with the Innocent Network Impact Award. How much did that mean to you to get awarded that?
It was a big deal. I'm not going to lie. The Innocence Network Impact Award is awarded to a freed or exonerated person every year. One person who has had an impact in shedding light on wrongful convictions. And so, it was very, very meaningful to be recognized for. I go in front of legislatures and try to get laws passed that would protect innocent people. I do a lot of writing and storytelling around not just my own case, but other people's cases. On my podcast, Labyrinths, I did a really big series recently about false confessions and police interrogation techniques that are coercive. And so, I'm, in my own little way, trying to take what I have learned from the Università of Hard Knocks and put it to good work. And so to be recognized by my community was huge.
Such an honor, and you really are doing amazing things. And you mentioned this, you were interrogated for 53 hours, over 5 days, in a foreign language, without a lawyer, coerced into signing statements in the middle of the night. This all happened to you, but you learned that this is also all too common.
Yeah, for the several years into my imprisonment, I just didn't understand. I had no context, no understanding of what I had been put through in my interrogation room. And I actually really blamed myself for what had happened. My Italian wasn't good enough. Oh. I was too scared. I was too confused. The police were mad at me, and I just got overwhelmed. And I didn't realize that false confessions are very, very common in wrongful conviction cases. More common in cases where the stakes are at the highest, when there's like a murder charge. And so really what we need to be looking at is what is happening behind closed doors, where innocent people are being coerced into implicating themselves and others in crimes. And a lot of it goes back to, basic bullying, just like beating at somebody and yelling at somebody and long enough until they feel like there's no way out except for me to just say what they want me to say. Or a huge thing that I'm really pushing back against is deception. So a lot of people don't know that police can lie to you, and they can present to you a false reality. They can say, we have your fingerprints at the crime scene. They can say, we have witnesses who place you at the crime scene. And a lot of people either will think, oh my God, I'm being framed. I need to confess just because I need to mitigate the damage here. If I don't, they're gonna put me on death row, who knows?
Right.
Or in my case, I was actually convinced that I had what is called trauma-induced amnesia. It goes back to, during the Satanic Panic in the 90s, when people were convincing children or convincing adults that the reason why they had depression was because they were molested as children, and they had repressed memories of traumatic events that they couldn't actually remember. And so they would be hypnotized or whatever to draw out these real memories, which were not real.
Wow.
Like, this is how police will construct a false reality around a person and make them think, oh my God, I have no memory of being a part of this crime, but could it be true? And they start to question themselves, and honestly, it's just institutionalized gaslighting. And so
that's what I was gonna say. It sounds like gaslighting.
It is gaslighting. And so the thing that I want to push back against is this idea, I've been in front of the legislature, and one of the most frustrating things that I have ever heard was a representative of the police saying, we need to lie to people in order to do our jobs. And I'm like, what happened to serve and protect? Because what happened to me was I was not, out there committing crimes. Like, someone had committed a crime against me. I came home and found my roommate was raped and murdered. I called the police for help. And then what happened? They lied to me and they betrayed me. That is not what our relationship should be. No one should ever be afraid to call the police because they're afraid the police are going to just turn on them.
Yeah, and twist things. And many of us, believe that phrase, like the truth shall set you free. But, I'm feeling like you have feelings on that. It's not always necessarily true.
It's not, because I think in our adversarial system, it's not like it's this scientific laboratory where a lot of information is boiled down to truth beyond a reasonable doubt. It's really a battleground of storytelling where the prosecution tells a story, the defense tells a story, and the jury just has to decide who they believe. And I think that it's really difficult because we can't agree on what are actually facts. We can't agree on what is objective truth, and then it becomes a matter of, well, whose subjective experience or who's telling the more compelling story. And so for me, the thing that I mean, a lot of people reach out to me and say, like, I'm an innocent person in jail. What can I do? What can I do? Or I'm being wrongly accused. What do I do? And it's not as simple as the truth will set you free. Again, I mentioned that in a lot of cases, there are people who can be proven to be innocent, but the way that our laws work, the Constitution does not enshrine your right to be free if you are innocent. It only enshrines your right to a fair trial. And if you've gone through all of the trials and you're still innocent in prison, there's nothing we can do about it. So it's really about changing people's perceptions when they go into the courtroom and serve on a jury, being a little more skeptical about the stories that are being told to them, and also just trying to change laws to protect people from being put in that position in the first place.
And so on that note, like, what would you like to see happen with laws and beyond?
Well, my sort of big thing is interrogations, which we act like what is happening in an interrogation room needs to be protected. It's almost like this sacred thing that we cannot touch. So I think we need more transparency and we need to eliminate lying. Another thing that actually I learned from the Italian criminal justice system that they actually do better than we do here is that all verdicts are motivated. So in our country, a verdict is delivered, guilty, innocent, but we don't know why. We don't know why the jury came to that decision one way or another. In Italy, they have to have a written document that explains why the verdict was one way or another, so that when it comes time to appeal, we don't have to guess what kinds of evidence we need to present in order to make a compelling case. We know what they thought was true and what was not, and then we can prove based upon those facts.
Very interesting. Gosh, okay, well, I could continue talking with you for a long time, but I know we can get into. I know we gotta go. The show's over. Amanda, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences with us and all the work that you're doing to reshape the systems. We really appreciate your time. And thank you to you all for spending time with us today. You can check our website for more of our content, and you can always send us an email to share your thoughts. Don't forget to enjoy your new day, and we'll see you next time.